My name is Liza Daly. I'm the VP of Engineering at Safari Books Online. I founded a technology consulting company called 3Press that was acquired by Safari. I've been working in digital publishing since 2008 and web development since the 90s when web development began.
And you have a degree on psychology.
I do. I have a master's in psychology.
Yes, and what made you change from psychology, pretty much academic setting, to the publishing industry?
I originally switched from psychology to web development because it was the time when the web first emerged, and I was really excited by the technology and how democratizing the web clearly was going to be. This is before it was a big commercial enterprise, but it had so much potential that it was something I really wanted to be a part of. And so I worked in the general web community for many years, but I was always interested in working with good content and working in a space where we were providing information that people really wanted. And that's really what the publishing industry is about, is providing information for people in a way that's compelling and interesting and fun. So the combination of publishing and the web, to me, was a perfect vehicle. My HTML5 based reader, Ibis, was originally developed in 2010. It was an outgrowth of earlier e-reading experiments I had done with websites. At the time, most e-reading was still being done on specialty devices, and to me it seemed important to make reading available on the open web rather than locked into a particular device or device maker. And initially there was some resistance because I think people felt there was a strong distinction between reading a book, which was something that you did on a device, and reading on the web, which was seen as very different. But I think we've come to realize in the last 2 or 3 years that it is all reading, and the more available reading material is on the open web, the better it is for companies, for individuals. So Ibis was a first attempt, and now there have been many better software programs to do web-based reading, but I'm very happy to have been part of the books in browsers movement pretty early. I always tried to make as much software be open source when I was independent. Part of that was really because that was a good way to promote the business and to build a community inside the larger publishing space. At Safari Books Online, we are a commercial company, and much of our software is closed source, but we are very much big believers in open source. And in fact, I have been recently taking the time with our developers to look at all of our software products and decide which ones we should open source, and making sure we have the time to support those packages and make them more available to the community. So if anything, I think we're going to move more, my company will move more into open source software, because we feel that the business value is not really in the software, but it's in how you use it for your particular industry. And it is beneficial to everyone to release source code, which by itself doesn't have much value. The value is in how the companies use it. So we can provide the source code, and we're not giving up a competitive advantage. And instead we're helping support the entire industry, which is good for us too.
Would you give me an example of how the benefit of open source, running an open source business?
I think we will, especially this year, we're going to see or the next few years, as particularly the Redium project and the EPUB.js and Annotator, there are a lot of very mature open source e-reading and sort of digital publishing tools coming out that before those existed, it was very hard to maybe start a new business because you would have to license a very expensive e-reading software, or you'd have to build it yourself. And now that the industry is maturing, I think we will see many more interesting startups that don't have to start from, now we're going to build an e-reader, or they can start with shared annotations, which I think will be very important. So we at Safari are going to be, in fact, we are adopting the annotator.js code base for our annotation solution, which just means that even if we're incorporating open source software into our commercial software, but we will contribute back to that open source and have a more common platform across other ebook distribution channels because we're using similar tools. My background in psychology very much informed my interest in accessibility. In fact, my research work was in reading disabilities. So to me, the really a requirement of providing digital reading material is to make it accessible to everyone. And certainly there are many groups before digital publishing that were left behind, either because they were blind or in other ways not capable of reading printed material. So I think it's our responsibility as a community to provide information to all groups of people in a way that is accessible to them.
I think it's been about 2 years since the book Futurist Manifesto has been published. What's the most important change in the past 2 years since you wrote the article?
I think the most significant change in particularly around accessibility and interactivity, which is a lot of what I write about, I think has been everyone realizing how important those things are commercially. And for example, it's been clear that many schools are going to move towards digital textbooks and sort of digital reading products. In order to do that, those texts must be accessible. That's been a good role for government to insist that products provided in schools are accessible to the whole community. And so there's now both an ethical driver towards building good, accessible reading tools, but also a business driver. And those two work together very well. O'Reilly's published a few books on digital publishing. HTML5 for Publishers by Sanders Kleinfeld is certainly a very good place to start. There have been, O'Reilly has also published several books on EPUB 3, which is not seeing the adoption we might have expected when EPUB 3 came out, but almost anything that's been written about EPUB 3 is good advice for digital publishing in general in terms of creating quality content, creating accessible content. And certainly more now than in the past, there are good best practices coming out there. A few years ago, there were just a handful of blogs for people to read about how to do good markup, and there are certainly many more resources available now. I think in the United States we have seen both some of the advantages of using a single platform like the Kindle. It's been great for building digital adoption of and reading, but for places where there isn't yet a single company that's so dominant, I think readers really can play a role in supporting a healthier ecosystem. I love the Kindle. I have good friends at Amazon, but they're such a dominating force that I hope in other regions we have a greater diversity of commercial and non-commercial publishing and distribution channels.
So how do you think people are reading 20 years from now?
In 20 years from now, I think people will always do the same kinds of reading that we see now, in the sense that there are cases where you love to be absorbed in a book, you love to be a part of a story by a single author. I don't think that experience is ever going to change. That one-to-one communication between one author and one reader is very powerful, and technology does not change that relationship. But certainly we already see very different kinds of conversations that happen online, where authors and readers blur their lines, and there's commentary and exchange, and that I think will only add to the reading experience. That we will still have the solitary, one author, one reader relationship, but we'll have a greater diversity of reading and writing experiences in addition to that.